Hello and welcome. It's me, Zarena, and today I will read for you from Bungie's Destiny 2 lore book, Trials and Tribulations. Hope you enjoy. Chapter 1: Instigate. It was supposed to be a garden world. The phrase will echo across quantified cross-sections of conflict, uttered in confidence, had always been false. The expanse above, a cup rimmed in gamma ink radiance, dammed against the Mercurian sky at the Karman line. Against the howl of star wind, the fountains of the great deep burst apart and the floodgates, the black screen of tomorrow, fell open. Within the rip, without form known nor ever to be seen, a monolithic hulk of fluid and steel convulsed, eternal and always, and excreted coils of shimmering, glorious life. Probing host of multitudes, clattering tendrils, an ungodly horror that no time would accept, slithered down the gullet of the heavens to make landfall. Chrome-hooked appendages breached sky counted in triplets, stretched for miles through sun-soaked atmosphere. They bored with deepest intentions into the marigold sands. From the great temporal chasms, wailing mouths of creation flowed an ocean, a second conception of radiolorient fluid. Across the horizon of definitive sprawl, the scene was superimposed design, resonant and uniquely multiplicative. Each injection site, form mirrored in the hundreds of thousands, fostered a new lineage in stone and steel and fluid. They would live the new age in subroutine sleep and observation. They would foster the metallic seeds of a generation in twilight time. From the sites bubbled pools, progeny of endless possibilities that murmured chaotic lullabies of change, and wrung the traveler's light from Mercury. The light coalesced, imbibed within the pools, the planet transformed, reborn into a sleepless dream machine of prediction. The arms retracted, purpose fulfilled, and returned to space between time, temporal hovels, suspended just above Mercury's last gasp influence. With them, in compliant tone, rose the spires. From the core, threads of iron, dancing in coaxed animation, fused reinforcement into the spires and brought them high. A surface driven flat, prepared by eons of solar erosion, had been resurrected, risen. A million open mouths sang, curled plated tongues in ritualistic completion. Across the world grew beauty, a terrible consciousness that yearned to establish the connection, find its progenitor. The hulking vessels cried out, pulsed with light. The pools and spires pulsed dull tones in recognition, and the starless black sealed once more, restoring the Sol-dominated sky, awaiting an angular shadow. Illumination left the spires, who had begun their work, and the light was sown, erased. Chapter 2. Postexolic. Curious, Osiris mutters to himself, running his fingers through the dry and dusty etchings inside the spire on Mercury. Sagira, record this. I'll want to cross-reference this pattern with any other constructs we come across. Gladly, I was looking for inspiration for a remodel anyway. I am in no mood for humor today, Sagira. So it's just like any other day. Osiris ignores his ghost, fixated on the circular metal structure embedded into the ceiling above him. He stares intently, almost through it, pondering its function. The begetters are apparent to him, a cause for concern. Dropship approaching, Osiris. Cabal? I wish. Your devotees. Osiris shields his eyes from the marigold sand whipped up by the landing shuttle as he approaches, his frustration already mounting. Turn back, fools! He yells before the doors could fully open. Teacher, we're here to support your efforts. A woman dressed in an ornately patterned cloak appeals. My efforts are none of your concern. Now go. Osiris's dismissal does nothing to dissuade them. They look to the woman for guidance as Osiris departs. She advances, and the group moves in lockstep. Like scolded dogs, they follow him back toward the spire. Persistent bunch? I've noticed. Sagira scoffs. Osiris turns to address them, catching them off guard. I don't know what you hope to accomplish, but my work does not require zealots. We only seek to help. The fashion in which you were ousted from the vanguard, they were wrong to chastise you. They will come to regret their decision, she says with the conviction of solemn promise. Is that a threat? They are the architects of their own destruction. You misunderstand the events that transpired. I was not exiled. I chose to leave. There is no acrimony with the vanguard. Go back to your lives, Osiris says as firmly and calmly as he can muster. I'm afraid that's impossible now that we have read your teachings. My research is not gospel. It's science. It's truth. Osiris considers this. Truth seems subjective these days, Osiris says, finally observing his entourage for the first time. Among them, a small group of men and women, stand two wayward guardians, warlocks, it appears, and a child. Their forlorn faces resonate with him, castaways and believers. The weeks since his departure from the last city have worn on him. He was used to working alone, knowing he could fall back to the city's resources should he need them. Now, adrift in the expanse of purpose, he finds himself longing for a place he could return to, a sanctuary. I have no intention of staying here. There are many constructs like this, They all require my attention. We will follow. No, you won't. I need to move quickly without burden or baggage. Osiris pauses. The irony in casting these people away is not lost on him. But I can offer this. Stay here. Watch over this place. I want to know everything you can discover about it. Should anything occur, I will return. We are at your service, she says, relieved, and bows to Osiris. He grits his teeth. Unpack the ship, she beckons to the group. Yes, Sister Feora, one of the taller men replies. If you find yourself lost in the darkness, we will be your lighthouse. Osiris nods, repressing a twinge of discomfort. He looks up to the spire. Chapter 3. The Cult of Personality. Vance had been sitting for the better part of an hour, waiting. Somewhere underneath what had been called the lighthouse, a small chapel had been erected in which an open book lay lonesome upon a lectern overlooking a middling number of pews. He could hear a cast of attendees shifting in their seats from time to time, but mostly he heard wind and stillness. Vance had arrived early in the morning, as much as morning remained a concept on this blasted planetary waste. His impatience was starting to sweat through his face, loosed by doubt, time, and the meddling of his own thoughts. He feared the others would notice and pulled a small square of cloth to dab away the perspiration. No one seemed to know he was coming. He had yet to see Osiris, and none had spoken of the prophet beyond cryptic phrases or referencing texts he already knew. Vance faced back towards the haggard door that kept dust and sand from whisking into the spire chapel. He no longer felt sunlight casting through it as he had when he first sat down. Vance gripped the pew, preparing to leave. Whispers trickled from a passage at the front of the chapel, like drips of condensation falling on echoing stone floors. The passage was small, but twisted downward, deeper still than they already were. Vance could not see where it led, but from it he heard measured steps and metallic chimes. A robed figure draped in symbology and smelling of fern emerged from the passage. Flanked by two guardians trimmed in gold, one carried the scent of warmth, the other ozone and tang. You are all in attendance to hear of our findings. The next directive brought to us through the divination of Osiris's own hand. I have seen his words, and I believe it is important for us to remember why we followed his path before we look to the future. Vance removed his hands from the pew and slid them into his lap. His eyes jittered in blackness behind a fresh cloth wrap, waiting for clarity. The two guardians circled the chapel, lighting candles and torches that billowed incense. The air thickened. Osiris tells us that the darkness will return, that the darkness will rise and choose its champions. Tell us that we may look beyond ourselves, beyond the city, if we are to combat such an evil. The traveler alone will not save us. We are meant to save the traveler and all of its people. Vance could not help his outburst. The very same who would have cast us out? Who exiled the prophet? Sister Feora allowed the murmurs to rise, simmer, and rest before speaking. The lightless are filled with fear. Fear is a seed of darkness, working to compel them to its ends. Osiris sought the truth between the light and the dark, through death and study. For their fear of his revelations, they cast him out. The laity nodded in agreement, and Feora continued. The speaker wishes to remain in ignorance, but ignorance is the shadow that welcomes the night. It is the drop below the horizon, where a star sinks into surrender, lightless. We will not allow such a fate, not here. Sister Feora takes a deep breath. We must remain vigilant if we are to protect all the light has touched. The proselytizing figure steps from the lectern. You have arrived only hours ago, did you not, brother? I believe I witnessed your arrival. He did not think his presence worth noting. I did my sister, Feora, superior. Of course, sister. He should have known from her authoritative tone. I have come to learn. Then your first lesson is this. Listen. The choice to close their ears is what drove the city to fail. It is why we must conduct our work here. It is why, without us, their walls will be for nothing. Vance fell silent. Sister Feora let his submission linger and then continued. Each risen light-bearer, each guardian is light, made flesh by the traveler. They are a light, and light is wielded. When we refuse to wield the light as needed, we give ground to the darkness. Sister Feora looked out over her congregation. I'm sure many of you have grown curious as to what light we could wield somewhere as desolate as this. Sister Feora allows herself a smirk and brief chuckle before inclining her head to the two guardians now seated at the back of the chapel. It is here that we will stand against the second eclipse of the traveler's light. It is here that the collapse shall begin anew should we falter. I do not know when, only what is and will be. They stared back at her, eyes full of conviction, faces bright with belief, hearts filled with assured direction. Their minds lacked nuance. Vance's chest swelled as he breathed in their stalwart faith, coiled around sweetly smelling barks and spices that popped over torchlight. The spires of Mercury shall be filled with the glory of the traveler. Their light will shine against the long shadow when darkness reaches to snuff out the sun. Mercury will sing when day finds night, and we will direct it. These are Osiris's words, by his own hand. We followed the prophet here to facilitate his preparations for the second coming, whatever they may be. She marinated in the energy of the chapel. We will learn how the light here is to defeat the darkness. This is what he has asked of us. These lighthouses are our deliverance. And now, My brothers and sisters, there is much work to do." The herd stood in response to their shepherd, Vance among them.